Okay, so we've talked about value streams, using them different ways, and I will get into value stream mapping the next session, I think. But I want to also talk about value stream identification. In other words, merely knowing where things are. And I'm going to give you a case study. This was where sometimes you just need to kind of look to see where does the workflow, no data other than where does it go to? It goes to these. You don't have any times. You don't have any real mapping. I'm not even sure I'd call it mapping, but it's a very lightweight mapping. And Ross Acuff, one of my favorite thought, well, he's not now, he's passed away for a while, but I love his talk about systems. But his successful problem solving requires finding the right solution to the right problem. We fail more often because we solve the wrong problem than because we get the wrong solution to the right problem. And we're going to see this. This was the case study from 2006. I remember it well because it was my first lean software development workshop I taught. And I remember that was in 2006. The Poppendix book came out in 2005. I read it. Excuse me. I had experience with Deming back in the late 80s and some with Toyota about that time too. I just had this amazing business consultant and he brought in all this cool stuff. He was decades ahead of himself. So here's a case study from where I use value streams in the 5 whys. The situation was these were best of breed web developers. Remember this back in 2006. So web development was big, but it's not quite like it is now and you didn't have the tools. They had 100 people in their development group. They knew their problem was in development. We'll see why when we map it. The 2 people that were there were the manager of development and the manager of the project managers. Why? Because we had a development problem. This was a known issue. They knew this. They did not come in here wanting to figure out where their problem was. They knew this. Okay. So what we did is we did some simple value streams mapping. This was just an exercise in a course. So these 2 people are off doing theirs. And they mapped out all their different steps with sales. And then it goes into development. I put it in red because development was the problem. And then it got deployed. But what they looked at also was that after deployment, sometimes after it was installed, the lead dev had to go back and fix the problem. It would get installed, something would go wrong. Now, you got to keep in mind the context of this. The lead, they installed it, they deployed it. Everything was, well, not okay, but we didn't know it yet. And then they started another product, another web service. And then the lead developer was called in, oh, these people aren't happy, you got to fix them. So all of a sudden you had a develop team now without the lead. And the lead is seeing what's going on and then going back, interrupting the work that's there. And what they noticed was there were queues, large queues, in front of, because now we couldn't get things deployed and we couldn't get things developed. And although it only happened 5% of the time, they figured this was costing them 20% of their capacity. This was the situation. So this was the value stream mapping we did. This was in an introductory course, and I know how to teach this a lot better than I did 17 years ago. And yet these 2 people could come up with this. And now we knew what was going on. We didn't know what the problem was. So there's this 5 whys technique that comes from Taiichi Ohno, the guy who created the Toyota production system. And basically it's kind of a shortcut for why, where, when, who, and what, I guess. I'm getting them in the wrong order. But he just said, you just keep asking why. And I'm going to add this actionable cause. See, in manufacturing, you can often get to root cause. In manufacturing, you can see what went wrong. But we're not doing manufacturing. All sorts of stuff's happening. We're a very complex situation. And there could be a lot of whys. There are a lot of root causes. Your mom might have dropped you on the head when you were a kid, and now something happened that reminded you of that, and you just did a bit. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You get ridiculous. So what we want is to find an actionable cause. There's not one root cause. And this is where people kind of go crazy with this. There are many possible causes. We want to find the one that can make a difference. And we'll see this. I'm just kind of setting this up because a lot of people get funny about this. So 5 whys, it's who, what, why, where, how, and when. And it's, again, actionable. You don't always ask 5. 5's about right. So you might get to the answer at 4. Maybe you got to go 6. I've never had to go past 6 or 7. So I said, why are the installations not successful? And they said the servers hadn't been configured properly. Okay, well, why weren't the servers configured properly? Well, the customer wasn't aware of a configuration program that they were given. They actually had this thing that, they were supposed to run, then they'd install it and all this. Why weren't they aware? They weren't told about it. I mean, this is seriously what the conversation was. Well, who's supposed to tell them? Sales. Now, at this point, I didn't need to ask question 5. I knew why. If you're a salesperson and somebody says we're going to buy your stuff, you don't say, well, before I can take your money, you have to promise you're going to run this stuff. You're going to have to do this work or I won't take your money. No, they're not going to say that. They'll say, thank you. We'll do a good job. And they bury that requirement in the contract, which of course nobody reads. And even if it was in the contract, the right person wouldn't be reading it. And this was the problem. The servers weren't being configured. Now, this is why I mentioned the actionable. Okay, maybe what should have happened is that when the developers went out there, they should have checked. Yeah, they should have. Maybe they should have written their code more robust. So when the servers are wrong, it'd fix it. But actually, given this, maybe all we have to do is have salespeople do it in a way that actually works. So what happened? Well, the 2 people who are at the workshop went back. I actually found this out. I didn't have anything else to do with them after the workshop. I mean, they liked the workshop, but they figured they can handle it. And I found out later that what they did is these 2 people went back, had a meeting, and they spent an hour to figure out what to do. I remember in the workshop saying something like, well, maybe we have to tell them and be heavy-handed and this and that. But, you know, a bunch of devs aren't as good as salespeople. So what the salespeople said when they went back, they had a conversation with the sales and execs. And what I found that the salespeople said was, oh, great. I'm so glad you're letting us provide you these services. By the way, we have this really cool configuration program that we normally sell, but you know, you're such a great client, we'll give it to you. And after you run it and configure your systems, then we'll schedule, when you're ready, we'll schedule the installation. So they made it sound like it was a big plus. And they also changed the sales commission from time of sale to time client said the installation was successful. Notice how what you pay people affects how they operate. So the salespeople are really happy to do this. It was all a win-win-win. And again, it was touted as a feature. This worked beautifully. Here's what's really cool. 1 hour, 20% improvement in a 100-person development group. Now, why is that even possible? Because you took out all the waste, you took out all the task switching, you took out all this high leverage point of problems going away. Now, was I lucky that I saw this? No. I looked at the value stream, I saw the problem, they looked at the value stream. By the way, they did that value stream mapping on their own, then we talked about it. When you have the right tools, I'm not saying you always do this, I wish, but you can get some amazing improvements at times. The source of our problems are not always where we think they are. That's why I love with that quote by Akoff. Light value stream mapping can often identify where our problems are. This took an hour. 5 whys can be used to get to a root cause. Again, you don't need to think about all these different things. We want to identify an action where we can take for improvement. I call these actionable root causes, because I'm not saying there's a root cause. I don't know why people throw that in. There could be multiple root causes, several things combining. Sometimes you need to fix them all. Sometimes you just need to fix one, which was the case here.